So let's hear now from our guest, Paul Cheetham. Paul, welcome. Thank you very much for being with us today. Paul is the co-founder and managing partner now of Sedulo, a fast-growing business advisory firm that works with some very successful people. I mention that because Paul says he takes inspiration from the people he works with and for, and that inspiration has enabled him to come up with his own blueprint for success and resilience. From growing up on a council estate in Stockport to now running one of the fastest growing advisory businesses in his sector, Paul's come a long way. He's an author, having written a book called Taking Care of Business, and has his own podcast of the same name. And I must say, when we asked him for details of his 3M conversations, he gave us possibly the most comprehensive answer we've ever had, and also gave us a different slant on how we might approach a discussion of those conversations. So, Paul, hello again, and thanks for being with us today. And one of the first things you did tell us is that you have a strategy for dealing with those 3 a.m. conversations, and that's going to be fascinating. But before we get to that, let's put all of that into a bit of context and a bit of background about yourself. And if I can rewind almost to the beginning, you talk a lot in your book, and I've heard you say on a number of other podcasts, that you had to face rejection at an early age. So tell me a bit about that and your upbringing and how that came about, if you don't mind.
When I wrote the book, it really kind of allowed me the first time ever to reflect on a life. The more I realised there's a child inside us all.
Yeah.
There's a kid that something happened to. And it can be feeling like the less of a couple of siblings, or it could be the person who got picked when the kids are in the playground picking the football or the netball or the team. You're last to get picked, or you got bullied, or your parents split up. And in my case, you know, my very first memories, and the more I look back at them now at 46, there was about 2 or 3 years in my life that was chaos. My biological father's not in my life. He left at 2. And his constant rejection from about the age of 2 to 4, 2 to 5, plays a huge part in my life. And then my stepdad came into my life, by the way, at the age of 5, just to be dead clear. And I've got a dad from the age of 5. And I lived then a normal lifestyle, but a normal working class life. But from 2 to 5, it was just constant rejection. And I think, particularly when you become, and I would never say I'm successful because I would cringe at the thought of it, but I think I could probably accept I'm semi-successful from where I come from. But you've always got, you then start to have more questions, right? The more kind of money or the more successful we were deemed, the more unhappy I became. So that's why I'm quite open to talk about it, because there'll be a lot of people wondering why they're anxious, or why they get depressed, or why they have imposter syndrome, or why they have 3 a.m. conversations with themselves that we're probably going to discuss in a minute. And actually, there's a point in their life that they need to try and uncover, I think, to make sure that 46-year-old Paul doesn't make the same decisions as a 4-year-old Paul.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. And we never get to the bottom of the real issues, because the amount of people that are successful that fall off a cliff is because they think that in some cases money or things are going to solve a kind of real dysfunction. And actually give somebody who's dysfunctional more money and see where that ends up. Give them more success or fame or accolade
or responsibility
and see where that ends up. And it actually is disastrous. So it's like, let's deal with it. And the only way we do that is by talking about it.
Yeah, no, good. Well, let's move on slightly on the journey towards, and I'm going to say successful. Allow me to say successful. Along the journey, you talk about one of the steps being, before you qualified as an accountant, I think, you were managing the post room in a debt finance business. And I think it would be right in saying you learned an awful lot very quickly in that role, but you really drove it. So tell me a bit more about that.
It's the thing I'm most proud of in work.
Is it still?
It's my most successful moment.
Yeah.
And it's strange. So I did a sports science degree, and then I thought, I need a job, so I'll be an accountant. And there was a job going as a trainee accountant in Manchester. So I applied for the job and I get the job. It was growing rapidly. And the owner of the business said, we've got a problem in the post room. And And it was a debt management business. You remember back in, this is about 25 years ago, debt management was a new industry.
Yeah.
It's that thing where you're in debt, recession had just been, you ring up a debt management company, say, I can afford 250 quid, here's all my creditors, deal with them.
Yeah.
Right? So he was the first in. He went ballistic. He had 50,000 customers in, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. So he said to me, will you do this job and sort the post room out? I didn't know what it was.
And you'd be about 21 at the time.
I was 21 and I'd just got my first suit. I still was in sovereign rings and so on because I was still a bit of a scally, to be honest with you.
Had you ever managed people before?
Hey?
Had you ever managed before?
I'd never had a job. My only job that I'd had was weekends at B&Q, right? So I walk into this room and there must have been, it was millions of pieces of paper was everywhere, unopened. And there was about 20 lads. They were lads. I think there was one woman in there, but there were 20 lads. And then they'd walk around dressed in trackies. They only, everybody else had a suit in the organisation, but they were called they weren't called the scallies, they were called the numpties. It was a numpty department.
Right.
And they kind of played on it that they were numpties, right? They were average age was about 20 years old. They didn't really want to do anything, but they had no self-respect for one another, for themselves. He gets about a week in and the guy come to me, the boss, and said, right, just tell me what you've done this week. I said, I'm trying to get him to work quicker. And he was like, right, of the 400 bundles of posts that coming, how many you've got through? 100. Right, so we've gone behind again. And truthfully, he looked at me and he never said a word. But that look was a look of dejection, disappointment. And I thought, I'm never fucking having somebody look at me like that again.
Yep.
Right? And he never said a word. And he went out and I thought, I want to do something about this. I'm never having that look again. So the next day I come in and I said, all of you go home. So I said, you all go home and go and get something on that's at least smart casual. You put a shirt on. If you've got a jacket, you put a jacket on. Come back tomorrow. We didn't do any posts that day. They came back the next day. Some of them didn't come back. The rest of them come back, looked a bit better. I said, right, the next thing we're going to do, you're going to be accountable. So you're not going to give it her and give it him and give it him and give it him. Tell you what you're going to do. I'm going to put your name, we're going to put your initials on. So when you open that and you stamp it, it's yours. And you're going to go right the way through. I'm going to train you up on everything they do in the organisation. I'm going to train you, right? And you're going to become accountable. So then I'm going to find out who's good and who's not good and who's indifferent. And that's the next thing. I'm going to measure you all. I'm going to put it on this board every day, put it on the whiteboard. I'm going to create a league table. And I was on 12 grand a year then. And I go, so I'm not going to go to the boss and ask him for any money because he thinks we're all crap anyway. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put, I think it was 40 quid a week. So what was he on? 800 quid a month or something, or grand a month. I'm going to put 40 quid of my own money in every week. And whoever finishes top is going to get a 25 quid prize. Somebody's going to get 10 quid. Somebody's going to get a bottle of wine or a crate of beer for coming third. So I said, the first thing is you've got this little competition going on. The second thing is what's going to happen is I'm going to train you all to be IT literate. None of them were. Yeah. So everybody's going to get 3 hours. There was one guy in there, one of the supervisors who could use a computer. I said, you're all going to get 3 hours a week on this, right? That's the deal. So we did that for about 1 or 2 weeks. And then I rang up off my own back. I'm 21, right? I rang up off my own back a local college and said, I want all these to get a qualification. So this woman came in from like a BTEC in, say, business admin or office admin or something like that. I can't remember it so much now. But she came in, I said, I want these 20 people. I want them all to get a qualification. So she puts this thing together. She comes back the next week. She says, right, here's like a syllabus. I come in once a week or once a month. I can't remember that detail, but she came in every so often and we set this homework. So I said, right, you're all working late now on a Wednesday. 5 till 7, we're all doing homework. Yeah. So a few of them drop off, but you could see that all of a sudden productivity is really starting to come through. We're now starting to do 50%. Everybody's competition starting to go up the league table from Division 1 to 3 and they want to be in 2. And all of a sudden we created a buzz. Yeah. And I would say within about 2 to 3 weeks, whatever was coming in that day was going out, delivered to all the divisions and departments that day, which then meant we could spend some of the rest of the time getting rid of the backlog. And in about 3 months, the whole backlog, I'm talking millions of letters, right, gone. To the point where, there was a point where 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they was just doing pure IT training. and computer literacy.
Because they've done the day's work, they moved on.
So the woman came in and she was like, I've never, ever had any group of people go through this qualification like should take 2 years. It was done in 6 months. So when you actually look at that, and I won't repeat it, but when you look at Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmare, right, he goes in and he does the same thing every single episode because he's got a formula. Yeah. He's got a template. And I learnt mine there. I tried to make it fun. You know, in Sedulo, what we do today is a massive one of our 3 pillars is just to make it fun. And that came back from then. It was little quizzes we used to have Piccadilly Gold on, you remember? But these kids were 20. I mean, I was only 21. And we would be listening to like 60s, 70s and 80s music, guess that. Just tried to make it fun. But I think as I've been an employer of people, I'm very, very demanding. Like, I'm a taskmaster. Can't get away from that. But I always think it's got to be give and take. What you're going to give and what do you expect back?
Yeah, but if you pick the bones out of that, you're giving them a sense of pride. You're giving them the feeling that what they do matters. You're making them accountable in a proper way.
Yeah.
You're giving them a career path. You're giving them new skills. It's all right, isn't it, in terms of a template?
Creating competition, which
yes,
I'm a big fan of competition. Yeah. And you're quite right. And I kind of play on that same formula regardless of the size of the problem or organisation I'm dealing with when I'm giving advisory work now. Yeah. We go back to that stage. It's the thing I'm most proud of. Yeah.
Well, let's move down the timeline a bit, bearing that in mind then, because eventually you get to the stage where you set up Sedulo on a credit card. So what was that all about? Tell us about the start, the early day.
I became qualified and worked in practice. Yeah. And that I really disliked. So I disliked that job and I disliked it for 4 years. When I look back, I learned a lot from it. But what impact did I have on any journeys of any clients? None. I made sure they were compliant. I might have saved them a bit of tax. It was transactional. It was a means to an end. And then one day I just thought, I'm just adding no value here. And so I'm going to do my own thing. So I set it up. And I set it up. Then the partner that I was with at the time, actually, my boss, he said, well, if you're leaving, I'll leave. And I set up with him. So there was 2 of us originally. And that just didn't work. So after 3 years, we went our separate ways. We had 10 grand a month. We billed 20 grand a month. And we had 30 grand a month for overheads. And I was still pretty young. I was 28 when I'd set the business up. So I was probably 31 then. I was 31 then, when effectively Sedulo became Sedulo as it was today. And we've got a 10 grand a month deficit and I owe out about 100 grand. It didn't faze me. It didn't worry me. I just knew we'd get there. And so we did. And we slowly started to turn it around and break even. And we slowly started to pay off the creditors one by one. I gave all of my creditors my word, and it's vital to me. I repaid every single one of them. And they all stuck by me and we shook on everything. And you know, another lesson there that I learned was if you give people your word and you're honest and you be upfront and you tell them the truth about the situation you're in, people will help you. If you bullshit them and tell mistruths and lack integrity, you won't get the same help the second time around. So, yeah, that's what happened. And we kicked off and we haven't looked back since.
Okay, Paul, so we are here obviously to talk about 3am conversations, and you've given us a different slant on that because you've come to terms with the fact that those are going to exist and that they cause you harm. You've had panic attacks and anxiety, and we'll talk about those. But you've come up with a number of strategies to cope with those, and that gives us a slightly different way of talking about this today. Graphically, in your book, you describe in the early stages of setting up the business, the anxiety you suffered with and the panic attacks that were crippling at the time. So what was causing them and what was this sort of effect? Because I don't think you've had a panic attack, have you?
No. What is it?
What are they like as well?
Geez, it's a really good question and it's good for me to talk about it. So I got to the age of 20, 28, 29 and I started to feel generally unwell. Lots of headaches, lots of feeling a bit woozy, feeling a bit out of the room. I didn't think much of it. Maybe my diet, not enough carbs, types of things, just what I put it down to. And then one day I was walking down the road and bam. The only way I could describe the initial one is as if you were running on a battery and I'd walked out of the plug. You know, when an Uber just goes, vroom. That's me. I'm in Bramhall in Stockport and I physically can't move. I can't walk. Even now, I can feel my heart coming back, remembering this. And I remember thinking, oh, Jesus, what's that in the middle of my chest? Palpitations. And I mean, boom, boom. And I think, Jesus, I'm having a heart attack. I'm 28, 29. I'm in what I thought was good health. I can't believe I'm going to die here in the middle of a shopping precinct in Bramhall at the age of 28. This was not how it was supposed to end. So I sit down on a bench. I close my eyes. I lie down. I just, there's nothing else I can do. And when I shut my eyes, and I'm not exaggerating it, when I actually shut my eyes, it's quite uncomfortable saying this, but I'm going to roll with it. I genuinely thought I might have just closed my eyes for the last time. I thought, fuck, I can't believe this. There was so much that I wanted to do. And then I fall asleep. And then I wake up. And I think, what's just happened? And I don't know if I was asleep for 1 minute, 1 second, 30 seconds, 20 minutes. I ain't got a clue. But I remember thinking, Jesus Christ, where's my mum? I need to get back to my mum. It's like 30 at the time. And I somehow get to my car and I drive to my mum's. When I get to my mum's house, I tried to explain to her what's happening. She makes me a piece of toast and a cup of tea.
Good old mum.
Right? And I have a sleep on a sofa, which is, by the way, that was the house that my mum's been living there for 46 years, as long as I've been. So it was like somebody plugged me back in again. Mm. So that's how it feels. Mm. And by the way, I then had them for about a year, every week. And then you've got to decide how you're going to come out of that, because I had it for a whole year.
I was going to say, was this when you were setting up Sedulo? Was that round about that time?
Yeah, it was. It was about a year in.
Right.
It was about a year into Sedulo as it is today. And I'm guessing I wasn't used to that level of stress and anxiety. I still have the same triggers and the same thoughts today, but I don't have the panic attack. Touch wood. Yeah. I actually think I could have one. And so I live a life to try and mitigate it.
Mm-hmm. You've worked out what the triggers are?
I've worked out I'm capable of having panic attacks. I'm capable of having anxiety. And what I've tried to do is live a life of commitment and dedication to reducing the triggers. So say, for example, caffeine. Right? I'm not going to have caffeine. I'm not going to have caffeine when I wake up in the morning for an hour, because cortisol levels are at the highest they're ever going to be in my body all day, because my body knows I need to wake up. And it wakes me up by giving me cortisol, serotonin, which also bring on anxiety.
Yeah.
So when you put caffeine in your body in your first hour, your body already knows that you need serotonin and cortisol. So you don't throw caffeine in if you're anxious in your first hour, because chances are it's going to spill over chemically. I don't have it after 11 o'clock because I know I need to have a good sleep, because big problem with anxiety and depression and panic attacks and stress is not getting good sleep. So I'm very aware what I put into my body. If I start to get shaky or edgy, I'll make sure I've not had that much alcohol. I do like a beer and a glass of wine, but I'll make sure I monitor it with hydration, with where my sugar or food intake is. I'll make sure I monitor my sleep. I live a life that allows me to work a high-pressure job, and I play the probability game of preparing for high performance, which is one of my obsessions in life. Like, why we expect sports people who want to high perform have to go through a certain protocol. But in business, we do exactly the opposite of what high performing athletes do. We champion, and back then I was a weekend warrior. I burnt the candle at both ends. I said yes to everything. I socially interacted Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and probably Sunday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday was trying to win clients, and Saturday, Sunday was playing football and going for beers. So that was my life. It was burning the candle at both ends. It was being a weekend warrior. It was sleeping's cheating. You sleep enough time when you're dead. You know, I can get up at I can get in at 2, 3 a.m. and get up at 7, and I'll be first in the office because I'm role modeling. That's the irony. I think back then in my life, I'm a role model right? And then you end up having panic attacks and you look back at 46, going back 15, 16 years, and you think, well, I wonder why.
So rather than, I'll suggest this to you, you tell me, rather than realising there's a particular issue or a dilemma that will trigger a panic attack, would I be right in saying you've just realised that the life you lead in business, high performance, leaves you vulnerable to anxiety and panic attacks?
Yeah.
And with the self-awareness that you've talked about earlier, the stopping at 40 and thinking back and all of that process you've got, you've worked out a lifestyle that effectively guards against the possibility of that happening.
Yeah, and it's a I'm working on probabilities, aren't I?
Yeah.
Tyson Fury talks about that a lot in his book because he had a lot of panic attacks. I think it's the same. So I play the probability game of making sure I'm prepared at best I can to withstand it.
It's like when you say it's anxiety, it's a biological response, and it's what you're addressing are the biological responses to things, isn't it? You're kind of looking at it from a very analytical point of view.
Yeah. That's the accountant in me. That's the practicalities.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really, really obsessed with the messaging, if I'm honest with you, about and why I surround myself with a lot of sports people, because their channel of high performance is no different than our three. Their channel's different, but the methodology and the practicality of high performance for a business meeting is no different than the high performance of running 100 metres, playing rugby, or having a boxing match.
Well,
it's just a channel.
You've said that, Peter, haven't you? Sports psychology. That's something that's come up.
I think there's
over and over again.
So many similarities between high performance in business and sport. I think there's so many similarities between leadership and motivation in sport and business.
Yeah.
You're managing high performing egos. You're managing high performance people. You're trying to get the best out of them. You recognise, as you've said, the human beings, they're not machines. You've got to make them work time and time again when the natural inclination is not to.
Yeah.
The techniques for achieving that are so similar. If you look at some of the high-performing football managers, the Jurgen Klopps, the Arsene Wengers of this world, the Alex Fergusons, how they get the best out of people, I suspect is very similar to how you get the best out of your team, and I used to get the best out of my team.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to our next 3am conversation, and that's very much about performance in business.
I was speaking to Kevin Sinfield not long ago, and we were chatting about what makes a great performer. And Kevin, and this was about 2 years ago actually, and he said to me, the only difference between a high-performing pro athlete and a high-performing semi-pro athlete is not the talent, it's the ability to recover. It really struck a chord with me, that, because this was a bit further down the line where I wasn't the weekend warrior and the role model of, 4 hours sleep's enough for me and 5 a.m. club type nonsense that exists all over LinkedIn, that one line alone made me just put a lot of focus in recovery. Sleep in the main, is where I recover. So I like to be around people like him, because I like to understand what methodologies he uses to get to where he's got to, and other people like him. And so sport is the best, because there isn't that many role models in business, is there?
No.
There isn't.
For the very reasons you talk about, we don't approach it with the same methodology, mentality. You talked earlier about the startup mode, and you are, if I may be allowed to say it, in success mode at the moment. The business is going very, very well, isn't it? Do you think the triggers are different from startup mode to success mode?
I'll tell you what I like about startup mode. You've got nothing to lose. And so weirdly, I think the pressure I'm under today is tenfold on a startup, right? When you're backed into a corner, if you're in a boxing or you watch your dog and you've got nothing to lose, you kind of got naught to lose. I think when I start to see business owners start to become more, I'm going to say more anxious, because that's just one way a business owner can go. But I think when they struggle the most is when they get something.
Yeah.
Right? When they get something and you can lose it. I interviewed Pete Cowgill at JD, and I think they ended up at 12 bill before he left, but there was 6 billion on the market at the time. And he was on my podcast, and I said, he was 60 odd at the time, what's making you go? And he said, well, I feel sick every morning. And why do you feel sick, Peter? He said, because what happens if we go backwards? And I'm like, but you're 6 billion market value today. And he was like, yeah, but what happens if we go back to 5.9? You know, so I think that real risk of losing it is the double-edged sword. It's what gets me out of bed every morning. And on the flip side, it's what gives me the most, makes me feel the most uncomfortable.
Is it responsibility as well for the team that you've built? Because, you've got some great people and they're all relying on you,
of course
aren't
it
they?
is. Imagine that. Just imagine. People have to go through that. Telling people that, and there's the ego side.
Yeah.
Imagine the downfall. I've always said to my missus, we'd have to move. I could not walk around after everything I've done and how I've built my business to put myself out there. A lot of us who are successful, if we use that word, we've still got fragile egos because guess what started us? We started from a position of vulnerability, so we're still quite vulnerable. So there's a whole mixture of like, what would happen to what happens to the staff? What happens to the family? What happens to my reputation? What happens to my identity? One of the things I still struggle with is that the question you just asked me is, I should be able, having given it a go, achieved what I've achieved from where I've come from, how much we've given back to kids and foundations and all that stuff. If it all went wrong tomorrow, really, I should be able to just sit there really comfortable in my own skin. But I wouldn't. My identity would be shattered. I think that's what some people don't understand. They think if you're successful, you cross a line and you're forever successful, but you're not.
That's it. Yeah.
You're as successful as your last 6 months or 12 months maximum.
And I mean, you see business owners who leave in their 70s that lose their identity, don't you? It's not necessarily that you're in the thick of it. It's hard for people to leave something like that behind and live a different life.
Yeah. And I mean, that's if it goes bad.
Yeah.
But it's the same if it goes good.
Yeah, exactly.
Because purpose is the thing that keeps us alive. The studies on that with the rats, the ones that had a purpose stayed alive, the ones that wasn't died. Now, I work with a lot of athletes and they retire at 35. Business owners, when they sell out, I mean, it's like, I've always found it's quite sad that, I've got to be careful here because we do a lot of deal advisory work, but there is nothing around an entrepreneur who sells out. So PE come in, give them the money, buy them out. Not always PE, of course it can be trade, but there's absolutely no idea. There's no even thinking of that person's just banked a big check but lost his identity and his purpose. And it's such a dangerous part of people's life that, and I've seen it go wrong at least as often as I've seen it got it right. And we watch athletes who are megastars fall off a cliff when they retire. The double-edged sword in that is you keep going like I do and you stay purposeful, but it means the yin and the yang is you're still always under consistent and constant pressure.
So if we move to our final 3am conversation, Paul, and you've talked earlier about you work with Kevin and a number of other leading sports personalities. I'm not asking you to name anyone necessarily, but is there another one that you would pick out as a role model? And what have you learned from them about managing these anxieties and mind games that happen to all of us?
I'm not certain there's one. Right?
Okay.
So I think there are different things I've learned from plenty of them. So for example, a 3am conversation that a lot of us have on self-belief. David Hay. David Hay was, and I'll give you another one in a second. So I'll try and give you a few snippets of people. David Hay was 14 fights undefeated, 14 knockouts, got in a ring, fight number 15, expected to beat a guy called Carl Thompson. 5th round, he's winning, gets knocked out. And I wanted to know what he felt like on the way back to the ring. Sorry, from the ring back to the changing rooms. And he said, well, when I woke up, I went with my team, and as I'm walking back, I smiled to myself and thought, I needed that knockdown. I needed that defeat. I needed that on my journey to becoming heavyweight champion of the world. Now, what a self-belief message that is, because I could give a number of boxings, I'm a big fan of boxing, where there was the next best thing that then got beat and then just could not ever recover from the knockdown. So whenever I get knocked down, and in business we get knocked down almost every day, I go back to what some of these other people have done on their self-belief journey, right? So that was David. What other ones have I got? And there's just so many of them. I tell you, Alistair Brownlee's one, the triathlete. He was an interesting guy. He was one of the guys who just went to Bradford Grammar School, so he never had any. And he said, I'm quite rare. I didn't have any of that inner turmoil as a kid. I just started swimming, running and cycling and never stopped. But he said, every day when I get out of bed, I've got my trunks next to the bed and the pool next to my bedroom. And the first thing I do is put my trunks on and go swimming. And he goes, and every day my mind nearly tells me, can I be bothered? Every day for 20 years, his mind has nearly, and he said, but I recognise it every day and I just turn it off. And that's such a simple tool. But I can't tell you how many times I'm going to the gym and get stuck in traffic. And I feel like, I look at the clock, can I fit it? And as soon as I get it, I remember Alistair and I think, just do it. Just switch your mind off. I live a life every day where I've just surrounded myself with people. Smartest person in the room, you need to change room. And I just try and take one or two things from them and then be myself. And that's what I've tried to do in sport.
There's so many parallels there with business, isn't there? I remember one myself, the David Hay one. And as a young lawyer, I was working with one particular barrister in London. And we'd had 5 or 6 wins on the bounce. It was great. Didn't know what it was like to lose in court. Fantastic. And we had a case go horribly wrong on us. The witness changed his mind. The expert witness decided he agreed with the other side, and we lost. We were battered. And I went back to the barristers' chambers in London, and the chambers had one of those old clerks who knew everything, had been round the block several times. And as I walked in, he could tell we'd lost. And he said, oh, sit down, Peter. And he just opened the filing cabinet and 2 glasses came out and a bottle of whiskey. And poured 2. Yeah. He says, about time you and Mr. Meeson got a bloody nose. It won't do you any harm, son. And that was 30 years ago. Yeah. But there's so many similarities, aren't there?
Tanny Gray Thompson was one. She that I remember. She listed all her accolades and said, it took me 30 years to achieve all that. But actually, all my world records and all the gold medals put together, it was something like 3 minutes. And she'd worked 30 years to put together a collective of 3 minutes. And you look at business, how quickly it goes, by the way. But I look at 15 years of what we've done so far and the blood, sweat and tears that goes into every single day. And actually, when you actually look at the success, it's just minute in comparison to the preparation, the commitment, the discipline that elite people, elite athletes, sports people are willing to go in to just have that 10 seconds on a podium or cross that finishing line first. And business is the same. You know what's wrong with society today and business people is they want it really quick. That's the big problem. It's great for me, great for the people who are willing to stick it out, to get knocked down like David Hay and come back, to handle the 3 a.m. conversations and keep going. It's great for us, if I'm honest with you, because people nowadays, they want things too quick. They're not willing to put 30 years in to get 3 minutes of success or stand on a podium.
No, that's definitely true. Looking at the business today, you've set up the foundation. How's that going?
We talked about purpose early on. Purpose underpins all that. I was really worried about what would happen to me if I lacked purpose when I looked in the mirror. What happens to my identity when I look in the mirror? I've not mastered it yet. When I set out, I really wanted £1 million business. But by the way, when I set out in a job, I wanted to earn 25 grand a year. When they paid me 25, I wanted 27. When they paid me 27, I wanted 30. Well, that was no difference with Sedulo. I wanted £1 million, then 2, then 4, then 5, then 10, then 20. And it just, you start to understand contentment and happiness is not going to come from meeting numerical objectives. And so I wanted to create a purpose that was infinite, which means until I'm gone, I've got something to work towards and achieve.
Does the foundation cause you any kind of worries in the way that a business does, or it's kind of a side project that what it produces is helps?
So our mission as an organisation is to give back to the make positive change in the communities we exist in. That's our mission, or obsession, I would call it. It's an obsession. Our obsession is to help kids. And the 20 graduates that started last week, they can share in that mission or obsession just equally as I can. Because there's always going to be a pecking order. In a Formula One team, there's a driver, and he gets paid more than the person who puts the nuts and bolts on the wheels. But the people on the nuts and bolts, they can't get it wrong. They have to be the best nuts and bolt or tyre person in existence, like he has to be the best Formula One driver in existence. So how do you get them as an orchestra all aligned? And I just generally thought that we had to create a mission that meant everybody can be equally as deeply passionate about it as what I am. And so the foundation gives the organisation that. It gives me purpose. You know, I can tell you now, everybody says to me, when are you going to sell out? Well, I can tell you what my sellout would be. I would sell out, then I would train, then I would eat healthy, and I'd spend the morning of righteousness, and then I'd go on the lash because I love a drink. And I can be as obsessed about drinking as working or helping kids. So I'd rather help kids. And that's why I've set it up. And it's my proudest moment is never anything we've done. Another question. So what's your proud? It's never selling a business. It's never growing a business. Or I'm quite proud of the post room story.
I could tell.
It's probably the least numerically successful story that I've got. Probably is actually. But I'm most proudest of it. But my proudest reflections is when I take the staff away every year. 250 of us go in Tenerife for this Christmas. And I look around and see the team and see them having fun and see them passionate about what we're doing. And that's my most proudest moment, along with the colour ball, which you obviously came to, which is I see how much our community backs our mission, how much our clients put their hand in the pocket.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that I'm quite proud of.
It's okay to be obsessed about that, definitely.
You've got to be obsessed. If you've got my personality, you've got to be obsessed about something.
Yeah, definitely.
So choose it wisely.
We could go on all day. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks
it's been a pleasure. It's been great. And good luck for the future.
Thanks very much. Thank you.